We're very, very excited about this, about the B465. As the name implies, universal, meaning that it will work with control panels from other manufacturers, and dual path communicator, meaning we can replace up to 2 PSTN lines with cellular or IP. Again, this is very exciting. It's one of the few products on the market that does this, and we think has some really special features that make it really powerful. So for the folks out there, our dealers, the IP and cellular replacement of PSTN offers a really nice opportunity for recurring monthly revenue, essentially taking what used to go to the phone company back into the dealer realm, and also trimming those costs for end users. It's a really powerful win-win solution for everybody. And eliminating PSTN lines, there's a really rapid return on investment with that. Anybody that has PSTN lines knows how expensive those can be. And we also have some really nice enhanced security features that go along with the B465 and our Kinetics solution. And I'm going to turn everything over to Tom.
Okay. Hi, everybody. So with the 465 also comes several peripherals that will also be used with the 465. And we're going to start off the presentation. We're going to talk about those a little bit. As you can see, running left to right, you can see a B10R. That's a new B10 enclosure. So if you're familiar at all with the B series, it has the same size and dimension as the B10. It's just painted red. And the reason it's painted red is because the 465 has UL864. Although it can replace one phone line, it can also replace 2 phone lines and is a target application for taking over fire control panel systems. There's also a B11R. You'll see in the parentheses that there's B46 is not supported. We'll talk about the B46 in a minute. But mostly the B11R would be used for a wire-in transformer, a plug-in transformer, our D1640. That's the same transformer that you would use with the G series, or if you were going to power from the host panel. If you look to the next enclosure actually has a wire-in transformer built right into a B10R. We call this our B10R 1640 120WI. What this does is it allows for DC power directly from that, or AC power directly from that wire-in transformer. There's also enough room in that enclosure to put a battery backup, which is also supported by the 465. In this particular image, you're seeing our D126 battery. So it's showing the wire-in from the wire-in transformer as well as the battery backup. In the top right, you see the B46. What the B46 actually is it's a local annunciator. It's a little piezo board that's got a 3-hole pattern that mounts to the B10R enclosure. It'll also work in a B10 as well as our D8103. It has a knockout in the front that'll enunciate different trouble conditions and meets the requirement for UL864. Previously, and with other competitors, what you might have to do is you'll have to run an output from the actual dialer capture device to an input on the host panel in order to enunciate a system trouble type condition. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as the presentation goes on. The last 2 images you see are probably something you're quite familiar with, which is our Kinetics receiver. And the reason that we've included on this slide is because the B465 has to communicate to a Kinetics receiver. So if it's a 6600, it's got to have a D6686 or an older D6682, 6680, or it needs to be a 6100 IPv6. So we talked about 2 phone line inputs, and that's exactly what the 465 has. It has a tip and ring dry contact input for the phone lines, so we can replace 1 or 2. You don't have to use both, but the option is there. We talk about the universal, the very first slide Stacy introduced to you, and what that means is contact ID, SIA, or pulse. Now keep in mind there's also inputs that are programmable on the 465. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So if one of those formats weren't supported, you could use the dry contact inputs as well to report different panel conditions via IP as opposed to using the PSTN that the host panel has natively. By default, we auto detect the format, so you don't have to do any configuration in the 465. In order to get those formats to work, it'll know what it is and it'll go with it. You can also go and configure that if you wanted to, so the option is there to configure it if you're having some sort of a technical issue, or just by practice you want to make sure that a specific format is being selected. But again, that is programmable. So the 465 is unique in the fact that it has both Ethernet and cellular native to the board. Much like our B series, we've adopted the module plugin design. Just to be clear on the module plugin design, it does not support the B430. The B430, for those of you who are familiar, is our dialer. It's for our B series and G series panels that don't actually have a DAC on the actual board itself, and so this is an option. But for the 465, that B430 module can't be used. You'll have to use our B440, our B441, or our B443. And I'll get in a little bit more about what those are if you're not familiar. But basically, there are cellular plug-in modules for CDMA 3G, CDMA 2G, or GSM 3G, which is also HSPA+. Some of our competitors actually call that 4G. But again, the most important thing to take away here, and we brought it up in a couple slides previous, is that reports are sent via Kinetics, which means you need to have a Kinetics-enabled receiver. So this is just giving you guys an overview of how it works. I mean, we don't send reports simultaneously via both paths. So there's not multiple reports being sent. It's more for redundancy and resiliency. But what you can see is you can see two phone lines connected via a host panel to the 465, and then the 465's communication path, which is the cellular and Ethernet. It can report to primary destination, and you can also program in a secondary destination. So if your primary destination or your primary receiver is down for whatever reason, the 465 will route the alarm to the secondary receiver. The nice thing here is if one technology, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, if one technology goes down, let's say you're using your Ethernet as your primary, it'll automatically go over to the cellular if configured, and supervision and everything, the higher supervision time, will actually kick over, and it'll maintain on that technology route until the primary technology, which in this case is Ethernet, is back available. There's nothing that you need to do. There's no different configuration that you need to go on site to mess with or remotely. It'll just do it automatically. So you can make sure that you're in compliance and that it's always routing back to the appropriate technology in the event that there is an issue. And again, we beat the point home that the 465 is only compatible with Bosch receivers. So one thing that we do a little bit differently is how we do our supervision. In this first example, we're going to show what some of our competitors do. As an event is sent from a control panel or a host panel, fire panel, whatever it may be, to the capture device, the capture device is actually either going to a NOC and then to a receiver and then acknowledging back to the control panel. As you can see though, the acknowledgement isn't going directly from the receiver back to the control panel. What's happening in actuality is the signal is being acknowledged before the receiver actually even sees the event. And so what that can produce is it can produce a false positive. Let's say the receiver's offline or there's something wrong with the path between the network operations center and the receiver. You won't know about that until that network operations center actually declares a comm trouble and then goes back to the control panel to declare the comm trouble. So in our solution, the actual event has to go all the way to the receiver and then the receiver back to the 465 before it acknowledges to the control panel. We're not intermediary acknowledging the event at the 465 or a network operations center or NOC. We're only doing it after the receiver acknowledges the event. And all that just ensures is the integrity that the message is being sent from the control panel to the receiver and acknowledged back at the receiver, or back at the control panel. And so you can see in this illustration that it's showing that the event's being fully acknowledged. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, and basically what you're seeing here is in particular scenario, cellular setup is your primary. If the event is not received at the primary receiver because it is offline, it will then try to send to the secondary receiver. If the secondary receiver, for whatever reason, is offline and there's a problem with the actual technology route, in this case the cellular, it'll try the secondary, which is the Ethernet. The Ethernet will then try to connect to the primary receiver. If the primary receiver is unreachable, it will then try again to the secondary receiver. If this fails, you will finally, after a certain amount of retries, end up getting no acknowledgement and a declared comm fail.
Okay.
So this is just an overview of the different listings that we have for the 465. The main takeaway here is it's listed for commercial fire and commercial Berg, as well as CSFM and FDNY for sole path. So we talked a little bit in the first slide that I talked in about the different power options, but the nice thing is we do have a lot of flexibility with how we allow the 465 to be powered. You can go DC power from the host panel to connected panel. That's a 24 volt DC connection. So your fire panels are the ones that are typically going to supply the type of current that's required. So it kind of excludes a situation where some Berg panels won't have enough current in order to support both their operation and the 465. So that's one little caveat to that. You can also do AC power from a wire-in transformer. And again, we talked about that new accessory, that B10R 1640 120 WI that has the transformer built right into the enclosure. There's also a third option, which is using our D1640 or our plug-in transformer. If you're going to use that in a fire application, though, you're going to need to use the D8004, which is a wall transformer enclosure, and that's required for UL 864. So we actually have kits designed around this that you can order based upon your specific application, and it should make it a little bit easier to help in your selection. So again, the 465 is designed and supports a direct battery connection. If you wanted to do a DC power from the host panel, it will also support the battery backup from the host panel as well. You just would need to make sure that you have the proper battery calculation in place that it will support both. And again, although we do offer different smaller enclosures, especially that are helpful in a configuration where you're using the DC power from a host panel, we also have those enclosures that will support the battery backup as well right in the enclosure. And some of those enclosures are the B10, the B10R, the D8103, and the D8108A. And I'm sure that you guys are familiar with those different enclosures. So we talked a little bit about the B46, and I wanted to go a little bit more depth into it. Again, the nice thing here is you're not relying upon the host panel to have available inputs in order to announce system trouble, power, or battery issues as it relates to the 465 module. So it's very nice from that particular perspective. So it meets UL 864, and it's really a cheap add-in in order to kind of give you that complete solution in order to meet that fire requirement. Again, it's also a sounder on there, and it's a pretty simple, easy installation. It has a proprietary connection that goes to the 465. It can't be used with any other panel that we have. It strictly is for use with the 465. It can be ordered separately, so if you find that you're in an installation environment that doesn't support doesn't have enough available inputs on the host panel and you needed to do this after the fact, you can certainly do that. It's also sold in kits as well. But again, it gets that local enunciation requirement satisfied for UL 864. So we hadn't really talked about this, but for programming, it's a USB program. So you need to have a laptop or another sort of PC type device that can connect directly to the 465. Just a note on that, on the 465 download page, there is a driver that's required in order for that to work. It's rb_b465.inf. It's actually in a zip file in there. You should have no problem finding that, but make sure that you have that actually installed before you get out on the site if you're going to do this installation on site. It also is going to require a male A to male A cable. We sell one, it's the B99. Any male A to male A cable can be used. And you're going to want to have, if you don't have like Hyperterm or something natively, some sort of terminal application on your laptop, you're going to want to get TerraTerm, which we again also give you on the website and is available for download. But any terminal program will work. But anyway, on top of that, there are 3 programmable relays that can be used for output responses. And some of those would include a system trouble, system fail, battery trouble, and any sort of a comm fail or cellular comm fail. So it's programmable. It's a lot different than what we've allowed in the past with the previous C900 V2, and we'll talk about those differences in a little bit. We also have 4 programmable inputs or dry contacts. We talked about that a little bit. If you didn't have a format on a panel that you wanted to convert that we supported, this is one method that you could consider, as well as using it really for any sort of input from any other system if you really wanted to. And those are all programmable as well. So we have a couple different configurations in the USB menu. We have a standard and an advanced. It's really to kind of simplify things. A lot of installations will only employ one technology, whether that be cellular or Ethernet, and probably one destination or one IP address for the Kinetics receiver. And so we wanted to make it as easy as possible. And using the standard configuration, you can be up and running within minutes. It's quite simple. If you look through the installation operation guide, you'll kind of see as it walks you through that. I'm not going to go through the specifics on that, but I ask that you go through it and you'll see that it's quite simple. There is an advanced as well. If you're going to be using IPv6, if you're going to be using UPnP. If you're going to be using 2 receiver destinations, 2 technologies, these are different examples of when you would actually go in and need to use the advanced configuration. But again, it really comes down to what your deployment requires. And again, you just create an account for the B465 in the 6200 software, and there's really nothing additional needed. Unlike the C900 V2, there is no requirement to go in and declare that it's a dialer capture device under network device. So again, we're really in 6200, all you're going to have to do is create your account. So a lot of you are probably familiar with the C900 V2. Bosch, a long time ago, we invented dialer capture and the technology, and this is really a big step forward for us in evolving that technology. And so I just wanted to go over some of the differences. We talked about that plug-in module on that 465 and that it supports cellular plug-in cards only. So as a result, we don't have that B430. We have no way to support PSTN fallback. That's really something we're moving away from as phone lines. We want to distance ourselves from that and be able to go in and retrofit existing older legacy technologies. Ethernet, it's future-proof from the perspective that we give you that plug-in module, so as radio technologies evolve, as the 2G network becomes less available and 3G later becomes less available, you're going to be able to go out there and you're going to be able to do a cellular plug-in card change as opposed to changing out the whole module. In that same concept, the 465 also supports IPv6. Again, if you're not using public IP addresses, it's really not as big a concern to you. But if you are, public IPv4 addresses are going all gone. They're going to be all used up, and we will be switching to IPv6. So if you plan on using a public IP address, you're future-proof from that perspective. With the C900 V2, configuration was a little bit more cumbersome with the dip switches. Currently, we have the USB menu as our primary way to configure. It's actually our only way right now. There is a phase 2 that is planned that allows for some web configuration as well, and we're considering bringing it into RPS on top of that. But this is a first step, and the USB menu is initially how we're going to accommodate configuration. We have a lot more power options. With the C900 V2, it only powered off a host panel. We've talked a lot now about the 465 and how flexible it is with its power options. So we'll leave that. And listings. Previously, with the C900 V2, you had to actually get each individual panel or host panel that it was connecting to certified as a total solution. And since then, since that time, we've shifted, and now we have a blanket listing for panels communicating Sierra Contact ID. So it really reduces the amount of work that you had to do from an integration perspective, where we'd ask you to capture events and then we'd submit to UL, and it took a bunch of time, and we had this compatibility chart that was pages and pages and pages long. And so we've really simplified that whole thing, and it actually feeds into my next point, which is, if you look at the amount of formats that we supported with the C900 V2 that we don't support with the B465, the reason for that is that's a culmination of years and years and years of getting different host panel compatibilities. And so we don't have that requirement with the 465. So we're starting off with a much smaller list. The 465 itself has no technical limitation as it relates to these other formats. It's just we added what we felt were the most common, and wanted to get those in there first before we considered adding additional formats. Better encryption on the 465, and again, we support local enunciation. We didn't do that with the C900 V2, so you actually needed to have an input available on the host panel, or several inputs, in order to announce different trouble conditions on the C900 V2 module. So definitely a big step up from that perspective. So rather than sit here and talk about all our competitors and what they do, you guys are probably quite familiar with a lot of them. We just want to talk about our competitive strengths. We have dual path, that is, we support Ethernet and cellular. We support GSM and CDMA. So again, we talked about the plugin module. We sell different plugin modules that support CDMA 3G as well as GSM 3G, and we're working on the next generation of technologies that'll support LTE and LTE Plus, etc. So that's going to continue to evolve for us. With the 465 module, you'll be in a place to be able to take advantage of those future enhancements. Multiple formats supported. Some of our competitors have a subset of that. I mean, I know it's not as robust as we had with the C900 V2. Hopefully we explained why it's not as robust. But again, we still have a very strong competitive advantage as it relates to the formats that we do currently support. The blanket UL listings, which will definitely take away a lot of those headaches that you guys had, having to report and get us those events from those host panels and actually submit to UL. No additional fees. So because we don't have a network operations center or NOC, the only fees that will incur are the fees that are related to the actual cellular service. So there's no additional fees on top of that. And again, we've, as many of you probably know, have changed our pricing model there and have pooled data plan pricing. So, we continue to evolve that as well. The flexible power options, you're not just tied to the host panel. You're not necessarily tied to having to wire in or plug in. It's really a combination of those. So whatever works best for your particular installation, we have the flexibility to accommodate. We talked about the field upgradable radio. I'm not going to talk about that anymore. IPv6, and then again the piezo and the sounder. Having to not rely upon the host panel to have inputs available. And some of these host panels have been out there for these fire panels, these Berg panels, been out there for 15, 20 years, and at this point they just don't have any inputs available. So I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy just to talk a little bit about our competitive position. We're not going to actually talk about the specific competitors, but we just wanted to kind of show how we felt we lined up.
Thank you, Tom. As you can see, very colorful graph here, and everybody knows that more bars is better. So we have more bars on the Bosch side, where we feel that we've really expanded the capabilities in this market and have really produced a product that is among the best without breaking the bank on that as well. So we're going to work. We have the USB programming, and we're going to continue to enhance that. And then we have the dual path, the CDMA GSM, IPv4, IPv6, no additional fees, the various power options, field upgradable radio, and from a cost perspective, incredibly competitive. So we really feel like we stack up very well against the marketplace. So when we were talking about, where might some good opportunities be to make use of the B465? So from an end user perspective, obviously the more PSTN lines you have to replace, the more opportunity there is to secure some really significant and fast return on investment. Any place where there's subpar PSTN infrastructure. It's no secret that the telecom companies are not making any enhancements to these networks. So any place that may have had some, significant damage from a storm or things like that, where that infrastructure has not been replaced, you may find some significant issues. Switches that have been moved into the digital switch arena and are starting to interfere with some of the communications from some of the older panels. So any place that you've been getting some comm fails and you've had to roll the trucks and go try and figure out what's going on, good opportunities there to look for a replacement. Obviously, any facilities that have higher security, encryption, life safety requirements, those are all very, very good opportunities to make use of the B465. And then facilities in regions that have exceptionally expensive PSTN service. You probably all know if you're living in one of those areas. And then obviously for the dealers, the imminent replacement of PSTN, the sunsetting of, all of that hardwired infrastructure, it's going away. So we're all looking for opportunities to make use of the latest and greatest technologies. Universal panel support. So again, this is not just for Bosch panels. This can be used with any manufacturer's panel as long as the formats are supported. And again, some of the PSTN customers that may be having some chronic communication errors, some issues that you find that you just have to be there all the time and can't quite track it down. This is a great opportunity to eliminate at least some of that PSTN infrastructure. And then recurring monthly revenue, which is great for the dealers, but also a significant benefit for end users as the cellular packages are much, much less expensive than PSTN. So large commercial structures, government facilities because of the security ramifications, higher education, lots of PSTN lines there, and multi-site retail. All very, very good opportunities for a B465 replacement. So I talked a lot about return on investment and what we've kind of developed here, and you will get this as a separate file that you can actually use and work with and change the numbers for your own use, is a way to calculate exactly what the return on investment could be, how the cost on a month-to-month basis will actually be reduced for end users. So this should be a really good tool to provide that bottom line that everybody's always looking for when they try to take on a project like this. So the break-even point in months is the final calculation there at the bottom. So, you know, that can be a really powerful message when you can go into, you know, a facility and say, here it is, this pays for itself in 9 months, 7 months, 10 months, whatever it happens to be. So you will get that as a separate file that you can actually use and, you know, modify it and make it your own. And finally, we are doing a lot out there in the market to try to raise end user awareness of the B465. So it's been the one of the featured products at all of our major trade shows this fall. So ISC East, the ASIS show that was out in Anaheim, we went to Canassa. So, and it will continue to be one of our major features into our spring shows next year. We're also doing a lot of social media push around this, as well as some online advertising, e-news sponsorships, things like that. So you may be seeing the B465 popping up from time to time in some of your industry pubs, on LinkedIn, places like that. I also want to mention out on YouTube in our TS2Go channel and the Bosch Security channel, we do have a video also that outlines and highlights some of the benefits of the B465. It's kind of fun, and you know, we would definitely encourage you to show that to end users or use that in your own for your own training and promotion amongst your own sales team.
Bosch, invented for life.